So the example library, process library, that I'll be using for the demo today is available from our website. And this can be found by selecting the Triaster platform, example process libraries. And it's the library, the blue library on the left. So at the end of this webinar, if you want to take a look for yourself, you can also go to this place and maneuver around the library as well. The Triaster solution enables organizations to capture, share, use, and improve processes. However, today's webinar will just focus on the sharing and the using aspects of the solution. The improvement capabilities are demonstrated in the improvement webinar, and the next one of those is scheduled for the 7th of March. And if you're interested in that, then I would recommend that you register for that webinar. Basically what that will do is give you an understanding how Triaster can help you quantify a business case for process change. Well, if you don't know too much about Triaster, well, we've been in this space for about 20 years or so. We're very aware that process maps really don't excite many people. However, quality managers and those responsible for business improvement know that process mapping can deliver many, many benefits. And these are only amplified as more and more people in your organization start to use the process maps. So accordingly, if you want to engage your end users, we know that the process library must be easy to access, easy to use, and attractive to use. This is why we tend to brand our process library. So I keep using the term process library. Effectively, a process library is a process repository. It's a place where you store your processes. So here you can see Triaster's process library. In fact, this building is not too dissimilar to the one that we're working in. And we view ourselves departmentally as well. So we've designed our library so that we have departments. And what this means is that our end users will be able to find the information they need quite easily. So if I was looking for a recruitment process, I would go into the human resources area. If I was looking for payroll processes, I could go into the finance department. The way you design your process library is very important. We recognize that to engage end users, it really needs to be able to be corporately branded. It also needs to have the look and feel and also easy to navigate so people understand where they need to go to find information. Just some of the examples of our customer home pages you can also find from our process library, or sorry, from our Triaster website, and that is from the Triaster platform, example customer home pages. The look and feel of the process library is key to engagement, as I mentioned. It needs to look interesting and relevant to the end user. And some of our customers even build an identity around the system and adopt a name such as Find Me or Oh Wow, which means our way of working. There's even one here like SunGuard are using something called Ask Pat, which is actually the project sponsor's name, Pat, but it also means process application tool, so they're having a bit of fun with it. But most of our customers do bring in this brand identity, and the process library, the business management system itself, people start to engage with it more because it has its own identity. Some of the types of audiences that you may have will depend on how you brand your library. Some people will like things to be much more engaging, more fun, such as the AAs. Process library, where you can see the little AA vans running around. If you're dealing with engineers, they might want something looking a little bit more functional and structured. So here's Fugros, and you can see that they've developed something a little bit more streamlined. The key thing is that it matches the design. You match the design to the intended end user preference. So back to our process library. I'm going to drill into the HR area, and I tend to use the recruitment process. It's something that we all are familiar with. We've either been recruited or recruited somebody, so I tend to use this process quite often. You can see that I'm drilling into levels of detail. At any level, we could link to processes or relevant documentation. For example, some of our customers link to their top 10 forms or scripts for call center staff. It's really up to you and what's useful for your organization. I'm going to select the Recruit a New Employee, and this is a very high-level overview of the recruitment process. All of our processes were drawn using Triaster's authoring software, Process Navigator, which uses Microsoft Visio as the graphics engine. However, Triaster also have a native Visio file import capability, which means we can easily import existing legacy Visio diagrams that you have lying around in the business. And then the files are instantly available in an online, easy, navigable repository. They can be searched upon and reported upon. In this instance, what you can see is the way that Triaster draw processes. We use something called the noun-verb method. What this means is that for every input that you have, you're doing something to it with an activity, and then you're producing something. Now, as I mentioned, you don't necessarily have to use this method. You can use any method or any notation you like BPMN. I'm using Visio's own stencil set. However, if you're trying to share content with a wide non-specialist audience, oftentimes the noun-verb method is very easy for them to understand. And when I say non-specialist, I really mean those people that are perhaps not process improvement specialists or business analysts. They're not familiar with reading processes. This is a very easy way for people to learn what processes mean, not only because we're using a small stencil set, meaning a small number of shapes, so they can easily identify what those shapes are, but it just reads from left to right, and it also means that we understand that a white box is an activity, it's something I do versus something that I use or produce, which are nouns. Now, excuse me, another major benefit of using the noun-verb method is that it starts to begin to identify waste within your organization. So for every activity that I'm doing something, if I can't identify something that I'm producing, the question begs, well, why am I doing it in the first instance? If you can identify something that you're producing, then the question begs, where does it go? Who's using it? And this is where Triaster comes into its own, because it does have this capability of linking end-to-end processes together based on inputs and outputs. So in this example here, you can see that I have a ×1. That ×1 is something called an off-page connector, and that will drive me to the next process that's consuming that deliverable. If it had a ×3, it would take me to 3 separate processes that are consuming that deliverable. So if I follow that, that's a hyperlink that takes me directly through to the next process. You can see my new employee is going into the next stage of the process. Here's my ×3, for example, and we can link back to one of the 3 other processes that has produced that deliverable. On this process, you will see that I have shadows as well. So each of the shadows indicate another level of detail, and this is a cue to the end user as well that there's another layer of detail underneath the activity. So if I click on Initiate Recruitment, I can drill into a lower level, and this will show me how we actually initiate recruitment. Again, we're using the noun-verb method, and then it also will take me over to the next process. So if I link over into the next process, we can see we're in the draft the shortlist, and I navigate on through to the next stage where I'm selecting a candidate and to the point where the new employee has been hired. So I can navigate horizontally through the end-to-end process. Notice that these processes as well are very concise. We're not putting a lot of information on the page. Another thing that we've learned through the years is that if you put a lot of information on a page, it's less likely the people looking at that or consuming that information are going to be able to digest it. So we try to keep things very concise, and we have some rules around these things. However, again, as I mentioned, if you don't want to apply those, you don't have to. The Triaster software is not going to stop working. But these are just some of the best practice ideas that we've come across in the years that we've been working with organizations. So I also have the capability of navigating vertically through the process. Do you see I have a back button here? That's a hyperlink taking me back up to the high-level process map. So I've got levels and layers of process. And so drilling down to select a candidate, for example, drilling back down into the second layer. I can also drill into a third layer at the lowest level. What we typically do is map at a very low level. So we map right above work instruction level, what we could term the seabed level. And when you map out this process at the lowest level, Triaster has a capability of generating high-level processes. So in fact, this process map that we viewed at the very high level, the parent process map, this actually has been automatically generated through the software. So you don't necessarily have to map at the very high level and drill down. You can actually map what's happening within the organization and then create that high-level management view of the processes. I can also build an end-to-end model within Triaster because I've integrated drill downs and off-page connectors. It understands how the process model interrelates. So in an example, I'm just going to pop into one of my folders here. I'm going to show you an end-to-end diagram, again, that has been generated through the Triaster's authoring software. So this is my HR process in totality, and you can see how the high-level process map, if I just zoom in there, is the one that we have just been looking at, which is recruit a new employee. The children processes, those things that have shadows on them, are on the lower levels. So we have initiate recruitment as one of them. We also have draft the shortlist. And notice the green arrows are also showing me the direction that the processes are going. It could also even show loop back, so processes that go back into other processes showing rework. So this capability is really effective when trying to engage people in understanding how their job fits within the larger scheme of things. And it's also very valuable when looking for processes that perhaps do not link to end-to-end. They're what we term process islands, and trying to figure out, well, where could they possibly go? Within Triaster, you also have a capability of linking out to documentation. This is typically used as your business management system, so a Google for your business. So linking into relevant information that will help the end user, such as forms, policies, work instructions, is very helpful. In this instance, I'm linking into a single document, but I could link out to multiple documents. Some of our customers even link out to, let me just go back in there. Some of our customers even link out into videos, health and safety videos, or even launch systems from those hyperlink circles. You may have seen this already, just back at the high level. You may have already seen some of the data that has been stored behind the processes or process objects. Basically, each of these shapes is effectively a database. You can start storing any type of data that you'd like against these process objects. Typically, behind activities, our customers will store responsibility, accountability. You probably heard the term RACI, so your responsibility, accountability, consulted, informed. Risk is also being stored normally by default. You could also put cost, time, cost per hour. Some of these things, by the way, are more things that you would use as part of your improvement or your re-engineering work, not necessarily things that you would show the end users, but just to give you an idea of all the types of things that you could potentially capture against a process. It's completely up to you. We'll teach you how to do it. You take ownership of it. It is likely as your business year on year, the type of data that you want to capture against your processes will evolve. So it's important that you know how to maintain that data file. Behind the process page, you can see I've got a HR director, Jane Smith, the author. Here we're starting to store information around change history. So when the process was last updated, who approved it, and when it's next due for review. Also who the owners are of the processes. So again, we view the page, the frame around the page as a shape as well, which also stores valuable information. Here you can see that I've got a HR manager listed at the bottom of my activity. The HR manager is the person who's responsible, so we can have anything displayed on each of the properties, or sorry, in each of the shapes. This is something called data visualization. So basically the shape changes behavior based on the data stored behind it. You can see some of these icons, 1K, 5, and a bottleneck icon, which is actually a little timer. You could also see that the shape is green. So this is based on data that's being stored. If I just scoot this over a little bit, you could see that I'm a low risk, which is why it's green. I think right at the bottom we have got, there's a number of people involved, or 5. There's also a bottleneck associated with it, which means one of these will have a yes in it. So if any of these didn't have those, yes, 5, the icons would change behavior, so that the behavior of the shape alters based on the data. On the risk, you can see I've got a legend on the bottom right-hand side, and that's no standard that we offer our customers, but some of our customers have done something different where they're showing departments or business areas showing the different colors so that you can instantly see which business areas are doing which activities. And of course, any of the data that you store behind your process objects, you can report upon. And this is the most important thing, is if you're going to store data in your processes, what are you hoping to get out of it? Here we can see HR manager. So that's the person who is responsible. So I could report upon everybody in the organization who is either responsible, accountable, consultative for, based on their job role. So let's say I just joined the organization. My name, I'm a HR manager. I can search maps by role. I could find the HR manager job title, and I should now see all the processes that relate to me, either that I'm responsible for, or I'm accountable for, or I'm simply just informed about. Other reports that just back on this one. In fact, this is great for induction and training, as you can imagine, and also great for building up job descriptions. Other reports that will be useful, I mentioned risk. So risk is often asked about. So again, we could pull the risk through, risk levels, risk descriptions as well. I can sort, filter, and group this data any way I like within our reports. They're quite flexible. So here you can see how I can sort and filter through that. Another report that's very popular with our customer base is the ISO 9001 listing by activity. So this is where they're storing actual clauses against the ISO 9001 where they feel like they're being compliant to that particular clause. And again, we can filter this information. So I could just drag that column header over and we can see all the processes where we feel like we're compliant to 7.4.1 purchasing process. And so this is great for external audits and internal audits. We've had some customers say they've reduced their external audit days significantly through the use of storing this type of information within their business management system against their processes. One thing we do know for sure is that people like to find information really quickly. So we're very much a Google society these days. So people want to find information by searching through, putting a quick search term in and yielding results. So we do have a quick search capability, which effectively looks across all of the process maps within your organization or within the process library itself. Here you can see that by typing in recruitment, I have 3 processes that contain the word recruitment. And that's not just in the title of the process map, but it could be process objects, even as low as metadata. We've also mashed up our product with other document management systems. So we could, for example, interrogate your SharePoint system if you have a document management system, or even if your documents are stored on a file server somewhere, we can also interrogate that file store. And we can bring through the results. So here we can see that I've got 3 policies that contain the recruitment, not only in the file name, but also in the content and the body of the document as well. So another example of this is on the metadata side is if I wanted to search for that particular clause, we could see that I have 3 process maps that contain that clause. And if I just zoom into here, I think it's on this one here, we can see that we have that 7.4.1 purchasing process clause available behind that activity. So the search is very flexible and very comprehensive. And we can create multiple tabs, as you saw, linking out to various different types of resources. Triaster does have a minor workflow capability within the tool itself. And this is primarily around your alerts and approval cycle. So governance is very important. If content within the process library is not accurate, people will stop using it. So it's important that we keep things up to date. And to help with that, we have this approval cycle. I'm just going to bring up a slide because I'm not actually going to push a map through the approval, and I think sometimes just visually seeing this is sometimes helpful. So essentially, authors, your process authors, are able to create process maps in something called a sandpit site. So you can see the first box there called sandpit. It's effectively a play area. It's a place for them to just work with processes in their own domain, not sharing the contents with anybody else. And if I just give you an example of that, let me just take you back to the library. I'm just going to go into my sandpit site. So notice it looks exactly the same. It's just a ring-fenced area where the authors can work. You know you're in the sandpit site, that you've got a yellow banner at the high level of the process library itself. So once the authors are ready for the processes to be approved, they set the process ready for approval, and it essentially locks the process down so it cannot be edited anymore. It subsequently moves itself into something called a pre-live site. Once it's in the pre-live site, designated approvers will be emailed to alert them that the approval is required. The approvers will access the pre-live site and view the process maps. So let me just take you into where they'll see. So if I go into my pre-live site and notice that I have a pre-live banner, it's a salmon-colored banner at the top. So it's a visual cue on a different site. Again, now this is the place where only your authors and your approvers will have access. So the rest of the organization do not have access to this site. And so I'm notified by email that I need to approve a process map. I can go into this area. I can either log in or use Active Directory so that I don't have to log on. I can be authenticated automatically. And here you can see that the map is waiting for approval. This is the hyperlink opening up that process map so I can view it. At this stage, I can approve it, or I can suggest rework with the reason. If I choose rework, what happens is it goes back down this route, back to Sandpit, unlocks itself ready for editing, also notifying the author via email why it's been rejected. If it has been approved, it moves itself onto the live site. And once it's in the live site, not only does it increment its version number, but it also can send out a what's changed alert to designated people. And I'll just give you an example of the type of change history that you would see. So we do have a complete audit history across the processes. I'm just going to go back into my live site. And if I go into my search and change history, here we can see, I'm just going to pick up claim expenses. I think I know that's got some content behind it. Here we can see claim expenses, the map called claim expenses. I've got from version 4.1 to 5.0, I've got an archive link as well. So I could see what it looked like at version 5. So here, if I click that link, that's actually taking me into version 5. So this is what it looked like prior to the change. And then I can also look at the live version, which is your version 6. So here we are at a version 6. So it's bringing you a trail of activity that's happening with these processes. Oftentimes what we encounter is when we're dealing with organizations is that they make a change to a process that hasn't been documented well, and maybe a year later they revert back to old ways of working because they actually haven't documented why they moved from that process in the first instance. So this will also help you with your continual improvement framework if you're trying to bed that in within your organization. It also helps with managing change. There is also a news page where we could start looking at the maps that are new and have been updated, and these are also hyperlinks taking me through to the relevant processes. With regard to continual improvement, there's also an embedded review cycle, which you can access from the live site as well. So when the process map has been approved, you can set your system to set the next review date months, in increments of months. So normally you would say maybe 12 months we're going to review that process again. So in a year's time, actually in 11 months' time, your reviewer, your designated reviewer will be notified by email that it's time to review that process. They will subsequently come in to the library and will view this area, which is the review maps area, and then they can see the processes in which they need to review. If no change is needed, the process just gets updated its next review date for a year in advance or another year beyond. If a change is required, it enters into that approval cycle that I mentioned before. You can also see upcoming processes to be reviewed. So if I look at my next processes to be reviewed, it should actually bring up, you can see I've got some in for 2018. I could also, depending on what type of permissions you have, you could also see who needs to review them. So not just myself, but I can see that Andrew Ridgely has to review some as well. As people within the organization now are moving more towards using mobile devices such as iPhones, and we recognize that having a design like this doesn't necessarily apply well to small devices. So you can turn on what we term a mobile site, which is effectively the exact replica of what you have in your process library, but it's a streamlined version of the home page. So that means that here we can, it pulls itself to whatever size you make it. You still have the search capability, links to documents, and navigating horizontally and vertically through the processes. You have all that capability available to you. It's just primarily it's the home page that we streamlined. It will still bring through your brand, your corporate colors, and things like that as well. You just don't have the big picture in the front, which is hard to scale in small devices. So that is the Triaster solution in a nutshell. And as I mentioned before, you do have available, you can go and register for the process improvement webinar. And let me just get back to my site here. So here if we go into the resources events, and it's from this page, it's called Achieving Better Processes and Systemic Improvement webinar. You can see that the next one's on the 7th, the following one is on the 30th, and you can register yourself for that event. Or if you have colleagues that would like to see the Why Triaster webinar, they can also register for this event too. The improvement webinar, as I mentioned, is very important if you're looking at simulation or reengineering processes or comparing as-is versus to-be models. However, if there's other functionality that you're interested in and you have some questions about, not only can you call us and ask us, but you could also use our online resource looking at the Triaster platform, what's your challenge? And if you scroll down in here, you can see that we've got a See All Features link, and that will actually bring up our feature matrix so you can see what is available within the solution.